A fellow cuber asked if I would show how I do a 5x5. So I do it so that I basically make it so that it is similar to a 3x3, where the edges are all, these three pieces will make up the same as on a 3x3, just the edge. And where on a 3x3, the center is just one piece. On this 5x5, the center is made up of these 9 cubies. But once I get it so that all the centers are the same color and all the edges, these center 3 pieces are correctly aligned, then I treat it like a 3x3. So it's called the 3x3 reduction, I believe. And then the moves are exactly like I do a 3x3, which I do the layer by layer CFOP or F2L methods with 2-look OLL and 2-look PLL. So I have videos about various parts of this other places. So I will go through this rather quickly, and then I will put excerpts in from key parts of other videos that might be helpful. But at the end, with all of the cases of the top layer, I have each of those in separate videos for various cases that you might get on a 3x3. So I won't go through all that here, and you can go look at that. So this is just a randomly scrambled 5x5. What I start with is the centers. I always start with white. Since it's an odd numbered cube, the white center is fixed. So I choose that. I have the center I'm working on the top, and I'm going to be moving pieces from what faces me. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get a bar in the center, either this way or this way. I already have 2 pieces together, so I'll rotate this, and I can rotate this one down. So that it's always something. That video ended prematurely. I guess I didn't have enough storage space, so hopefully this will let me record. So I'm working on the white center. I've moved one up from here to form a row, and what I like to do is make it then a column, basically. And I'm going to do this one next. There's no more white here, so I look for a white here on an adjacent. I'm going to move it up to here. But instead of moving one at a time, I'll actually turn the cube so that the white that I've already done is on the side, so I won't be messing with that. And I want to form a row here. So I see, and since we already have the center one done, we know we're going to have basically end pieces here for the center. So I see that there's not going to be one on the side center like that. So I'll move it down to the bottom. And now I see if I move it up to here, I've formed a row there. So I will just twist the cube again and rotate it up next to that one. Now I'll repeat that with the next whites. Okay, we know this is going to be a row. I want to move it that way. Let's find that centerpiece. Okay, it's not there. It happens to be on the yellow side. So I'm going to find where the whites were. So this is really where I want to move it. So it goes up there. But if I do move it, it's going to move this out of the way, which is fine. I'll just rotate this once. I'll move that one back down so it's where it was, and I'll move that up. And so the white center is all done. This is, ignore this edge because it's not matter. We just are talking about the center. So now I always do the yellow, and I don't want to disturb the white. So every move I make, I'm going to, or most of the moves, I'm going to have to undo what I did. So I want to start with the bar in the center. So I'll move this yellow up. I'll move this to a column position, 90 degrees, and I'll move this one back down because, see, I've dislodged that white. So that keeps the white intact. Now I'll do similarly like I did last time. I'll turn it to the side because I can solve here and not affect the white or the yellow. I'll look for that middle piece that goes there. And there it is. So I'll move it up to there. I formed a bar. I turn the cube. I want to put it over here. So I move it up, but I can't just leave it because that's dislodged the white. So I'll rotate that 180 degrees and then move it back down. And so white's still in good shape. Now I don't really want these up here with a hole in them. So I'll move this row down to here. And then I need to move this back because I've dislodged the white. So I'll rotate around 180 degrees. So what I'm moving back doesn't affect any yellows that I've just moved. And now I'm set up so I can rotate like I do, find that center piece that goes there, which is right there, move it up so I have another yellow bar. Now it seems like I would want to put it there, but the way to do that is to put it in a place that's already got a yellow, because we're going to have to rotate 180 degrees to bring the white back down, and that actually brings the yellow where we want it. So now white is still done and intact, and yellow is done. So now I just move to any of the colored sides. Doesn't matter. I'll start with red because there's two together there. I want to complete a row. Excuse me. So that's not one there. It's not one there. There's a piece. So that's completed the row. I'll turn that around and just move it back. I don't need to when I'm starting the first one, but it's a good habit to get into, as you'll see in a minute. So now I've got two reds down here. So I want to bring one corner up. We can bring this one up. So this corner is going to go to there and then to there. Now I have a row. So I'll move it so that it's a column now. And since it's the first center on this side, I don't have to do any jockeying of moving something here and moving it back. So I'll just move that like that. So I've got one left. So here's a corner piece, and here's this. Now I can move the corner piece up to here and it won't affect any of the red because there's nothing there. So that's fine. If I want to continue to do that and not disrupt any of this red, pardon me, I need to move this so that the piece I'm looking for goes in this slice, but it didn't have to be that way, and I'll show you in a minute why. So we've got one there, so we don't move it to there, we move it to there. Now we've got our bar. We can make it a column, and since this is the first one here, we don't have to move anything back. We can just move the red up there. Now the next thing to do is to do an adjacent face. Doesn't matter if you want to do this green one or that one, but don't do the orange next. So I will do green. We've got two there. See if we can find one to complete that bar. So we do rotate it to a column and move that back. So we haven't dislodged that. So we've got one column. Let's see if we can put a green there. Now here's a whole bar, even though it's on 2 levels down. But let's just move that up to here and then rotate this out of the way so we can move that back down, because if we don't move it back down, then we will have dislodged that. So we've got those taken care of. So we only have one more. And so here it is. We move the green up to match. Move it out of the way to move this back, because see, red is dislodged. Now we're ready to go. Again, we want to put it there, but we have to put it here to rotate to get it to come around. And so now we have red intact and green, and of course we haven't disturbed yellow and white and yellow. And so now we do the next one that's adjacent. So orange, we'll move this orange piece up, move that back down. We have a whole bar here. Move that up, move that down. And now when this is like this, it's kind of nice because we need this orange there. But what you can do is you can just move this center slice down to here for a minute and rotate this whole thing, because Now when you move that center slice back, these are aligned, which is nice, and we haven't messed anything up there. So we rotate this, and to move it up to there, we have to move it where there is one. So we do that, and we have all of the centers done. All right, we were able to solve all those, but here's another case that you might get at this point, is you have just, so you've got all of the centers done except for these last two, and you have just a corner left, and you don't know how to get it up there. This is somewhat harder sometimes on bigger cubes, but if you want at this point, instead of bringing a row down and making the row here and moving it back up, if you know the soon move, and I have a whole video about both the soon move, because that happens on the top last layer sometimes, or also I have a whole video about moving just these corners on large cubes. So you could go to that if you need more for referral. But basically what we want to do here is we want to line this up so that on the top, the wrong one is in the lower right, and on the face, the one that you're replacing it with is in the top right. And you do the soon move, which is right, U, back, U, right, U2, and back. And that has put that corner up there. So that's easy to remember and easy to do. Another case you might have is where you've got all of the centers done, except there's one piece that is not in a corner, so we can't do the corner move that I just showed you. And it's too hard for us to figure out how to bring a bar down and do a complete bar here. Again, on bigger cubes, this makes more sense. So this is where we do what's called a commutator. And I have an entire video about commutators for larger cubes, but basically what that is, and I think I'll show that here, and then will I put that video in? No, you can go look at that video if you want more information. But for the commutator, what I do is I line up the pieces either in the center or on the left of the cube. Again, with a larger cube, it makes much more sense. And so I put them in the same relative position. So this is in the middle left over here. This one's in the middle left over here. And the commutator I do is I move the key piece up. I move the U slice over, so that's out of the way. Whatever that piece was that I moved up, this column, I rotate back one. I do a U prime to move the U back around. That first column I moved up, I move back down. Then I do a U to go back to that, and the second column I moved up, I moved down. And that has fixed those and not affected anything else adversely. So the next step in how I solve this is I do the edges. And by edges, I mean I want to find 3 pieces and make them all aligned. Here we have 2. I need to find the other red and white and make that there. I have an entire video about that, which I will insert here. It uses a different color scheme. Excuse me. The color scheme is the same, but it happens to be a neon cube, and it's a little bit harder to see on video. So it's good enough and in depth enough that it will work for this. But I will insert that here, and I will go off camera and fix this, and then we'll come back and finish this cube. Start with the 5 and show you what I do. I do all of the centers first. So we've already finished the centers on this, and I believe I have another tutorial about that, or I could add one later. The next thing I do is I set out to do edges, and what I will ultimately want to do is 4 edges for whatever I choose to be the top and 4 edges for the bottom, and then I'll address the 4 that are left in a slightly different way. But what I do when I start out is I try to find some that are already paired to start out. So here's a good place to start. Red and white are already paired. So what I will do is I like to have these over here in the front left. I'm right-handed, it just seems to make more sense. And so the way I will do this one now is the red center will always be on either the top or the bottom, and the orange will always be on the other. So that's important to bear in mind because we won't want to disrupt that, even though we'll be disrupting these other centers when we move the edges. So the first goal is to find the other red and white piece. And we know, since it's an end piece, I don't need to be looking at any of these basically center ones, so I can just focus on edge pieces. And here I find it there. So what I like to do is note to myself which color of these two is facing me. So the red is facing me. And then when I found the piece, I decide, is that color that's on top, so in this case red, is it the same as the one that's facing me or different? In this case, red is red. It's facing me. It'll make sense in a minute as I do another one. So if it's the same, then I want to move it to here after I rotate. I'm out of focus a little. After I rotate the cube so that this side is up here. So I'll rotate this face. So I'm bringing this side up. I'll rotate this around so that piece we were talking about is now here, and then I have to reset that. So that has brought this piece down to here, which is oriented perfectly just to slide it over to there. So once I've slid it over to there, I have a completed 3-piece edge, and I can move it up to the top layer. So I move it up and then move another one down. When I'm deciding which one to move down, I like to start with ones that have white on them. It's just easier for me to pick. So I kind of like that orange and white one. I kind of like this green and white one, even though these two are flipped. So I'll bring this down. So now I'm probably going to look for a green and white. Notice that the red is still intact and the orange is still intact, but I've messed up this center, this one, and the one back here. But that's okay, as long as I always remember to undo when I move this front face. So I'm just going to look and see if I can find where that green and white one, that other green and white one is. And I don't find it yet, but I see a blue and white here, 2 of them, and they're oriented right. So it would be easier to go to this one. I only need that center piece, which is blue and white. So again, since I know it's the center, I don't have to look at this position or this position or this position, etc. I just need to look in these center positions for a blue and white, and it was easy to see it's not on the top. We've already spun the cube around. We know it's not on any of the middle layers, so that must mean it's on the bottom. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this way of doing it, but I like to rotate the cube around. So now it's on the top. And again, these videos are just for my own edification, not necessarily the best way to do something, nor the fastest, but this is how I do it. So now I know the blue and white's going to be on the top. I quickly scan and I see it's there. I do the same thing that I did before insofar as deciding which color of the two is facing me. It's blue. I look to see which color is on top. It's also blue. So like the case before, I want it to go here. So I rotate this front slice to move this edge up here. I rotate this around. So I put that piece we're talking about there. And then I have to be sure to rotate this back down. And now it's positioned exactly where I need it to be, so I can just slide it over and line those up. So I do the same thing I did before. I want to move this up to here. And I'll just bring one down. I like the white and orange because I like to look at the white ones. I'll bring that down. So now, as you can see, the top center is still intact, the bottom is still intact, but the sides are disrupted, but that's okay. So let's see if we can find another orange and white. Okay, I don't see it anywhere around there, but when I was doing that, I noticed there's a green and white, and there's a green and white. So I can't just move one of them over to the other because they would be misaligned. So one thing I can do is I can look for the other green and white piece. And there it is on top. And what I can do is, again, I can decide, okay, excuse me, what color do I want here? Well, white's facing me. This time it's different. The green is on top. So instead of bringing it to here, I want to bring it over to here. So like before, I noticed that, I'm a little out of focus, there we go. I noticed that the white of the white and green is facing me. This is the one I found where green is on top. So this time they're different. So instead of bringing this piece around to here, this time I'm going to want to bring it over to here. So I bring this side up, and notice the green and white piece that was wrong is getting moved up there temporarily. I'm going to bring the piece I do want over, and I'm going to bring this back down. And so that's done two things for us. It's gotten this bad one sort of out of the way, which is good, and it's brought the one I wanted down oriented correctly so I can just move it over and they line up. And now I also automatically know where the third one is. It's right up there because that's where it was a minute ago. So we look at what color is facing us. It's white. We see what color's on top. It's white, so we want it to come here. So I flip this around, move this over, flip this back down. We know it's now down here and it's oriented correctly, so I can just move it over. And I've completed that, so I can move that up, down and over. And so I continue like that, finishing so that I have 4 finished edges on top and 4 on the bottom. And I'll go off camera and do that and come right back. So now I've done most of my first 8 edges, but I wanted to show you a couple of things. So you'll notice that the top and bottom, the orange and red centers, are still intact. These side centers are not aligned together, but that's all right as long as I keep top and bottom unaltered. On one of the sides, let's call it the top right now, we have a completed edge, a completed edge, a completed edge, and a completed edge. So there's 4 that are done there. And then on the other one, which is now the top, we have 1 completed edge, another completed edge, and another completed edge. So I only have 1 more to go of my first 8. So what I wanted to show you here is I'm going to do the orange and blue. In this case, unlike what I've shown you before, I don't have this third piece up on top. It happens to be down here already in these middle layers, but it's oriented wrong. I can't just move it over to here because it's flipped. So what I need to do is I need to do a flippy move that moves these on the right edge and flips them. So the orange and blue, the orange will be on this side. In this particular case, the orange and green, the orange will be here and the green will be over here. I do a shorter move than most people do, but it works brilliantly for me, and I don't care yet about corners because we're not to that point. So what that move will be is I can either, obviously, flip this edge so it'll work with that, or I could flip this edge. It doesn't really matter. I'll just flip this since it's already positioned at the right, and that's how I like to do my moves. Sorry, this keeps coming in and out of focus. So what I do is an R, an F prime, a U, an R prime, and an F, and that has flipped these, and now this one is in a proper place that I can just put it over and finish it. So I'll find that last slot where I need to put it. Of course, I move it to one that's solved. I move the unsolved one to where it was and bring it down. Now we have all 4 on the top done, and on the bottom, that's now the top, we have all 4 there. So we only have the 4 center level, let's call it, ish edges to do. And the way I do this is what I think is different than I used to, so that's what I wanted to show you. The first thing we have to do is we have to realign the centers. So I need to move the green over. So green is all intact, white is all intact, blue and yellow, and of course your red and orange. If you've done everything correctly, that will work. If when you try to move one over, you have a mismatch of rows, then that means somewhere along the line you did something incorrectly and you'll need to fix that. So what I do now on an odd cube, like a 5, we have 3 pieces that make up an edge. And the centers of those edge pieces, like this orange and yellow or this red and yellow, they need to pretty much be fixed. So like in this case, these 2 are flipped. You would think that you could choose whichever one you want to flip the other way, but it doesn't work that way on odd ones, so we're not going to flip this one. We're going to end up flipping this. But first of all, let's see if we have any that are closer to being done, and in fact we do. Here we have 2 red and yellows, so let's find the 3rd red and yellow piece, and it's down here. And this is exactly how you want it to be aligned. In this case, what you do is you look at these that you want, and we're going to want to put this piece up here. The way to do this is make sure that the color that's facing you, so in this case the yellow, is also the color that's facing you here. And I'll show you the opposite of that in a minute. But so this one is perfect. So what we want to do is we want to bring this slice over to pick this up. And so you'll see in a minute. So we're going to bring this slice over. And remember that flippy move I did before? If that flips every one of these, it will end up not only flipping the colors this way, but it will also end up putting this up here and these down here. So you'll see. So I do my flippy move again. That has flipped all of these and put this perfectly so that when we reorient the centers, we move the white back. That has perfectly aligned these, and we've now finished that edge. So we just continue like that, doing these other 3 edges. So let's find one. So this is an interesting one. We have the green and orange. These 2 are flipped. You might worry about how to deal with this, but don't. When we put the right one that goes there, it'll take care of it. So we find the other piece, and look, it's right here. As I said before, we want the color that's facing us, which is orange, to be the color here that's facing us. This is not. So we have 2 choices. We could either do the flippy move already before we move anything, then it will be facing us. Or, since all of our centers are aligned, it's just easier to rotate this right side 180 degrees because we haven't misaligned any centers, and now that piece that we want down here with the orange facing us is here. So the orange and green, see that? So what we want to do is we want to bring the slice over to grab it, kind of like we did before, but we only moved it 90 degrees. So now we'll move it all the way over here to grab this. I'm just rotating the cube so this is at the right now. Like before, we want to flip this side. So we do our flippy move. And now we move this slice back. In this case, we had moved it 180 degrees, so we'll move it back 180 degrees. And look, that has moved that right piece there. And obviously, since it had to put it there, it moved the wrong one out of the way. So let's go find that wrong one. Orange and green with orange facing us. It happens to be over here, but orange is not facing us. So if we do the rotation of 180 degrees of this right side, kind of like we did before, now it's perfect. The color that's facing us on this side is the color that's facing us on this side, orange and orange. So we move the piece kind of that's opposite that row. We move that row over to grab it. We do the flippy move here. And then when we move it back to reorient the centers, we've finished that. And since we're doing these one at a time, we have not messed up that previous edge that we did. So we now do one more. I'll go ahead and do the blue and red. Similar situation as before. That's not blue facing us. So I'll show it you the other way, actually. We could have just rotated this 180 degrees like I showed you before and then gone over and gotten it. But I'll put that back. I said the other thing we could do is we could go ahead and flip this with our flippy move. Focus the camera. So the flippy move is like that. Now the blue and red, the blue is facing us, so it's perfect. It's what we want. Remember, we want to bring a row over to grab it. Excuse me, the reason we don't bring the row over that it's on, if we went like that to grab it, we've already moved it out of the way, so we can't grab it. So that's why you move the one that's kind of opposite it. So the one that's kind of opposite is down here. So we want to move this row. We do our flippy flippy, and we move the row back, and we've now combined those two. We have one more, it's there, same situation. It's not pointing correctly, so we could either rotate it over here and go grab it, or we can do the flippy flippy first. Now it's where we want it to be. Blue is facing us, blue is facing us. So we move this over to get it. And we finished that. So now we have 3 edges. And of course our 8 that were already done. So this leaves us with the last edge, which these are flipped, and this is called a parity. This happens sometimes, but not always. Sometimes at this point, this is already solved and everything is fine. But often you'll get this parity where you need to do a special move to reverse these. And I'm going to show you that in the next video because I have lots of different cases with that on different cubes. So that's basically how I do edges. This was shown on a 5x5, but I do it the same on the larger cubes. Smallest one, which is the 5x5 here. And I'll just put those slightly out of reach and show you my moves. Now, basically, I'm going to be concentrating on the row over here on the right that I want to move. You'll see this later on with these, and it's going to affect the one that's the mirror of it over here. Plus, I will move that once. I'll show you what I mean. So the moves are 15 moves. Sometimes I call this my 15 move algorithm, but I think of it in chunks of 3 sets of 5. And so the first thing I do is I want to move this row twice. So since we're not worrying about corners and we're not going to do anything that disrupts these edges, I could just move this row right there, but that's really hard to do. So there's nothing wrong with moving this last outside layer too, because it just really doesn't matter. So and I'll try to put this algorithm up there. I call this an R. It's not really an R because that would just move this. It's really an R wide. Later on, it's going to get harder to talk about these with the right notation. But so basically, this is what I do. I do an R2, let's call it, which is really an R wide 2. Then I do a B2, let's just that back one, and then a U2, and then the mirror of what I moved over there, which is this one, I'm going to move to me once, and I'm going to move this end piece too because it's just easier to grab, doesn't matter. So that's an L, which is really an L wide, and then another U2. So those are the first 5. The next 5 I think of, as I say, R to me. It's really an R prime wide and a U2. R away, which is really an R wide, U2, and then an F2, which is just an F2. So those are those 5. And then the next 5 I think of like this. R back home, so I say R, which is really an R wide, sorry, yes, an R wide, and then F2, and then I think L back home. So this is the L, which is really an L prime wide, and then a B2, and then to finish it off, R around twice, which is really an R wide 180 degrees, so an R wide 2. And that has solved those three. So it sounds more complicated than it is, but watch how easy it is then on these others. Okay, for some reason that last one didn't record, so this might not be exactly how we ended that last one, but basically the concept is the same. We have all of the centers done. We have all of the edge pieces, meaning all three cubies that go together to form an edge are aligned. And now it's basically at the 3x3 reduction phase. So I do it like I do a 3x3, which is F2L, CFOP, layer by layer. There's different names for it. I'm not sure if I do any of those purely, but basically I do a white cross first. And we're treating this as an entire edge, so we won't move each of these pieces individually. So to do the white cross, which I don't always do well, I'll just bring the white pieces down. And so there's the white cross, and then I do the F2L corner pairs. So there's blue and red. There's blue and red. So I like to do that. Nope, I move it away from the color. Move the blue and red over to there. And I'm reaching around the camera, so it's a little bit cumbersome to actually look through the camera and do this. These are together, so I need to separate those. So we have green. I move it away from the orange. I move that piece over. I mean, you know how to do a 3x3, and so hopefully you know how to do this in a way that makes sense to you. There are lots of different ways to approach this. Seems like every one of these I'm having them together and I'm having to split them up, which is not always the case. So green. And then I insert those. All right, so we've done the F2L pairs, which in this case, it's not just the first 2 layers, but the first 4 layers. Now we're at the last layer stage. This is a bar, because we're considering this just like the center and the 2 edges. For bar, I do this move, and I have individual videos about all of these 3x3 moves for the last layer that you can go look at separately if you need to. This one, I think I call headlights or automobile. Automobile, I think, because we have tail lights, yellow facing us, and headlights. And I think we do an F, and then 3 sexies. And an F prime, and that has put that back to that. So now we just align this, and in this case, these corners are correct. These corners are swapped, so I need to swap adjacent corners. Excuse me. I have a video for that, but basically I put the corners that are not needing swapped facing me. I do an R, a B prime, an R, an F2, an R prime, a B, an R, an F2, and an R2. And that has swapped those. I can move the corners over their correct sides. Now we have this case where we just have to move this over to here. So since that's red, I turn that way, slide the white over to that red side, And I'm sure I cover this in another video too. And there it is. It's solved. So a very long video, but I hope it helps you.